why it came out that way or why it was interpreted that way, or there was a disclaimer, which is, oh, you know me, I'm just really direct, or some other type of, I don't want this to be perceived really negatively. I mean, it can be perceived negatively, but I'm going to try to lessen the negative consequences. And, oh, sorry, I just bumped that. It probably shook your whole thing. So conversational blunders are best to avoid by thinking before we speak. And, that's a very old adage that we've heard our whole lives, especially when we were kids, I'm sure. But it's true. If we think through what we say before we say it, we're much less likely to cause a conversational blunder. Because often those blunders are created when we just say things, flippantly or really without considering how it's going to be interpreted or what consequences may come from it. Okay, so we're back to Battle of the Sexes. We have gone back and forth with this on different topics the whole semester. So I'm curious, do you agree that, number one, for men, conversations are negotiations? In other words, people try to achieve the upper hand and protect themselves from being put down and pushed around. So let me read that again. For men, conversations are negotiations. In other words, they try to achieve the upper hand, protect themselves from being put down and pushed around. Do you agree that for women, conversations are negotiations for closeness? People try to seek and give information and support and to reach consensus, and they also try to protect themselves from being pushed away. So, what are your thoughts on that? And if you are a female, you can share just from the female perspective that you agree or disagree for women, or if you'd like to agree or disagree with the opposite sex, if you're a woman and you want to say, no, I think men, that is true or that's not true. So if you would like to comment about that in your reflection, that would be interesting as well. I think that those things, I think you could argue either way, but I'd be interested to hear why your view is yes or no. Okay, here's another question. Women wonder why men fail to have an interest in discussing details of a situation, while men wonder why women want to waste their time talking about trivial matters. And I know that I'm generalizing here, and not all women wonder that, and not all men wonder that. But I would say overarchingly, that is typically true. So women wonder why men want to ignore details, and men wonder why women want to dwell on them. And so I'm curious if this rings true to you. And we've talked a little bit about this in some of the other contexts in the other chapters, but especially the type of listener that you are, that applies because, if you want something very clear and to the point, then, that wouldn't really matter whether you're a man or a woman. But I'm just interested to hear what your thoughts, because we're talking about Battle of the Sexes. Does this ring true in your experiences? Okay, so do you like being interrupted? And I think actually a few of you have shared on the reflection post that you are interrupters, and the first step to healing is self-recognition, right? So self-awareness. But if we're thinking about being interrupted, what does that evoke in us? What do we think when we think about being interrupted? What is interrupting, and why do people interrupt? Because I think it's important to think through specifically what it is and then why people do it. What is the motivation behind interruption? And interrupting is actually an exercise in conversational power. And it is an attempt to assume control of the conversation. That is just the root of what interruption is, to take the conversational control away from the other person. So it's really a power struggle, if you will. Now, it's a signal of conversational comfort, however. So while it is a little bit frustrating or offensive at times, and if you think about it as a power struggle, gosh, someone's trying to take control over the conversation from me, but it can be signal of conversational comfort in that it's not always an infringement, if there's an understood camaraderie between the two of you, that you're comfortable enough with each other and you're close enough with each other that you can interrupt and it's not going to be considered rude or offensive or any of those things. If you interrupt your boss consistently, that could have negative consequences. But if you're in a close relationship with somebody and the first thing that pops into your head, you want to share it, if that's an understood unspoken agreement that you have, then it's not necessarily an infringement. Now, battle of the sexes number 3. Who interrupts more, men or women? I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. I will save mine for a later date so there's no biasing. Okay, so this was actually a relatively short lecture. You should be excited because the last few have been quite long, so you get a little bit of a break. And just to kind of give you a heads up for the future, we're actually ready for a change. We're moving into a new section, and so the early stages of the semester are really kind of dealing with the ins and outs of interpersonal communication, the conversations, the listening, the nonverbals, all of those things. Now that you have those as your foundations, now we can move into deeper topics such as discovering the interpersonal dynamics, the emotions, trust, power and influence, conflict, those types of things. So those are the things that we're going to be moving into. So you can look forward to that, but I am always available through email. If you have any questions or any thoughts, you can also post in the questions section in the discussion board. But I appreciate all of your reflections and I look forward to reading them. So just please make sure that you do the activity from page 210 and then answer some of the questions from the lecture. And I will see you all next week. Thank you.